I'm going to be interested to see what your take on everything is. We played a program of yours just recently where you had talked about the 51 documents, but we want to discuss things as far as, what is it, 27th of July, year 2006, and it's really good to see you. And welcome very, very much to Conversations, where it's a pleasure to welcome to the program Lenni Brenner, an old friend of conversation, and myself. He's a real, honest-to-God, public intellectual of the highest order, a scholar. He's written many very important books, not the least of which was Zionism in the Age of the Dictators, and other books in the vein in terms of understanding the Middle East. More recently, he's been the editor of a significant document called 51 Documents, Zionist collaboration with the Nazis, and he's a scholar and understands the Middle East very well. And Lenni, welcome once again very much to Conversations as this all kinds of hell breaks loose in Lebanon in July of 2006. Welcome.
Hi.
So what do you think? You're taking a look at things. You got a really good understanding, a scholarly understanding of what's going on in the Middle East. Could you summarize for us what you think in a large-scale way what is going on, the precipitating incidents, and the context of that incidents that started the recent experience, the recent devastating destruction going on in Lebanon and so forth? What's your take on it, as they say?
Okay. Obviously, the recent history is based on much longer time period.
Yeah, right. It's not just a soldier being abducted. Yeah.
Okay. Essentially, the key to the whole thing is that, as the Zionists themselves said in their classic period, Zionism is a colonizing adventure. All right?
Interesting.
Well, I mean, you know, in other words, remember that they got in as a force in Palestine under the British Empire, and it was an open thing. They were granted, out of the generosity, you see, of the British Empire. They were granted a Jewish state, etc., etc. After a while, the British realized that this kind of talk about a Jewish state only provoked the Arabs, not only in Palestine, but in the rest of the British Empire, and the Muslims in the rest of the British Empire. So they sort of reneged on the matter, and the Israelis took matters into their own hands, broke with the British, and the Democratic Party administration under Harry Truman in the United States and Joe Stalin in the Soviet Union, those two wonderful friends of human rights, decided, each for different reasons, to support the creation of a Zionist state in a country where the natives were Arabs. Okay. What we have seen since then is two things happening at the same time. The Zionists attempting to maintain and expand their state, and the Palestinians attempting to get back their country from the Zionists.
Okay. I wonder, you said that a colonial, 500 years since Columbus, the Europeans have been colonizing much of the world, and there was colonies put out by the European powers, the Raj in India and China and so forth, and colonization was part of that. And after the Second World War, there was a movement. The zeitgeist was changing, and most of the colonizing powers, at least in their open colonization, projection of power upon peoples and colonizing them, they retreated. But is the Arab world, or does the world in general, which remembers the boot of colonial control by Europeans over them, and is very relevant to the conscience of the people of the world, do they see Israel, do you think, and particularly the Arab people and the people in general, perhaps, that had been colonized, and remember that, see Israel as a European, they were mostly Ashkenazi, a European-imposed colonizing effort by the part of Europeans, and that their going into Israel, into Palestine at that time, was running opposite to the retreat of colonialism from Indochina, from India, from Algeria, and so forth. And what do you think is their take? Do they see us as colonizers? And do we lack the ability to see them seeing us
let me answer your question, Harold.
Okay.
All right?
Just got it out, yeah.
Okay. Basically what you said is right. In other words, it was a peculiar anomaly that 1948 sees simultaneously the creation of the State of Israel and Britain out of India and the partition of the country.
That's right.
Okay. Well,
Algeria.
but understand that the forces were somewhat different. In other words, what you had in India before World War II was a ever-growing mass movement for independence from the British Empire, et cetera, et cetera. Okay. In the case of Palestine, in the case of Zionism in Palestine, what you had was I was 11 years old in 1948, but the environment that I was in was so politicized, okay, that I was able to understand some of it, and I saw some of it. Before World War II, Zionism was an offstage noise in Jewish America. Nobody paid any attention to it. Everybody was involved, concerned either with what was going on in the United States or what was going on in Europe.
And if anything, they were opposed.
Please. What then happened after 48 was all of a sudden, after the Holocaust, was that a wave of Jewish nationalism permeated American Jews, rich and poor, okay? Rich and poor, didn't matter.
Everyone was
in other words, 90% of the Jews here in the United States supported the creation state of Israel. What literally happened that induced the United States to support Israel, literally, and we have this from Margaret Truman, the daughter of Harry Truman, all right? And she wrote a book about her father, and she said, you know, very, very simply, Bob Hannigan, the chairman of the Democratic Party, at one of these meetings, he was it was, I think, a cabinet meeting. He was Postmaster General, Draftmaster General in those days, right? Got up and she says, almost made a speech talking about how the Jewish campaign contributors were wanting an Israeli state, et cetera, et cetera. And Harry Truman, who had been a front man for the Prendergast machine in Kansas City, everybody talks about the corrupt Irish Catholic Tammany machine. That was nothing compared to the Protestant Prendergast machine in Kansas City. But at any rate, Harry simply decided he wanted to get reelected. He wanted to get elected president of the United States. So he endorsed Israel. Now, at the same time, Joe Stalin, okay, supported Israel because since the Cold War had started, he wanted to get the British out of the Middle East, and he figured that if the British drove the British, if the Israelis drove the British out of Palestine, that would force the Arab princes to drive the British out of the Middle East. Now, that's his thinking. I mean, I'm not defending it or attacking. I'm simply explaining that that was his motivation. So you had these two motivations, totally separate. Okay, I mean, they're enemies in the Cold War.
Yeah, the big powers.
But two big powers backed Israel. You know, recognized Israel. The United States loaned them $100 million, which they then turned around and bought weapons from Stalin's Czechoslovakia.
No kidding.
Yeah,
really,
I mean, that's literally what happened.
Right.
Okay.
And they were always on the upside in terms of the power balance between themselves and the Palestinian people there.
Who?
The Israeli early Zionist efforts in Israel, they were always powerful.
No, what happened was that
it ever touch and go?
Well, I'm trying to say many of the Zionists had fought in the British Army during World War II, okay, and got military training. Since Britain was the imperial force, most of and the French, etc., most of the Arabs didn't get that military training. Okay, you had the Jordanian Legion, but that was it. Okay, so from a purely military point of view, the Israelis had a lot of experienced, trained soldiers ready to go.
And they had the firepower.
Well, once they got the weapons from Czechoslovakia, yeah. And remember that the Jordanian army was not exactly a popular force. The Egyptian army, let me put it to you this way. As late as the 1967 war, the Arabs lost that war because of the corruption of their armies. In other words, the guys who became officers in the Egyptian army would get paid to train troops, and instead of training the troops, would go off and play tennis. I mean, I'm not making that up. I mean, after that defeat people demanded to know how come we got beat so badly, and that was among the reasons.
Yeah, there's so few in Israel compared to the Arab nation
Right,
writ large.
but what I'm
and yet
saying,
the Zionists have been predominantly successful.
All right,
in
but
their
what I'm
military
saying,
encounters.
I'm saying is that the basis of that was that the Arab states, like Egypt under Farouk in 1948, was a puppet of the British, and a decadent puppet of the British, a puppet of the British, and the Egyptian army just simply wasn't a fighting force.
So you
now,
had,
for example, in 1973, the Egyptians were able to storm across the Suez Canal. The reason why they were able to do it was that after the '67 war, the general staff, the Egyptian general staff figured, listen, these guys, these Israelis, think they're racially superior to us, that we're stupid.
chosen people.
No. I mean, I'm telling you, let me tell you
okay.
what they, all right? They think we're stupid. Let them go on thinking we're stupid. What we're going to do is we're going to train special forces to the point of perfection. They'll only know how to do 1 or 2 jobs, but they'll know how to do them, if you know what I mean, all right? And these guys zipped across the Suez Canal and, just wrecked all the Israeli fortifications on the Suez Canal, okay? But in '48, it was no contest. You had these corrupt Arab regimes fighting the Israelis who were motivated and who were armed.
We probably had those kind of regimes in the terms of the British Raj and that kind of thing. The British were able to impose, and they had the ability to impose their will upon people, and it was a colonial experience. So, I mean, it was a colonizing kind. Do the people in the Islamic world see Israeli very powerful, very military superpower, ability to impose their will upon it as colonial overlords the same?
Look,
that's what I'm saying. Is that
Harold,
there
Harold,
in
obviously
their
they do. Everybody today, Harold, everybody today in the newspapers is saying that what is simply, for example, there's a fierce war going on between Sunni and Shia in Iraq. Okay?
Yes,
all right.
on the planet.
At the same time, now that the Israelis are attacking Lebanon, and Sunni, many street Sunni, Sunnis in the street, are supporting Hezbollah, which is Shia.
Yeah, they've gotten together in some.
Well, no, they haven't gotten together, but what's happening is that the old fantasies are breaking down.
The old fantasies of what?
Of religious sectarianism. In other words, what
Islam might be coming together.
No, it's not going to come together religiously. But what I'm saying is that if you, for example, right now Hamas gets support not only from Hezbollah but from Iran, both of which are Shia. Okay,
that's interesting. Yeah.
All right. Now,
and there's a linking of Hezbollah
Harold,
and Hamas.
Please, okay? What's happening is that Al-Qaeda is still going on ranting and raving against the Shia, but what's happening is that people are saying to Al-Qaeda, you're crazy. The Israelis are attacking in Lebanon, and you're worried about the Shia. I mean, we should be getting together.
We should be getting together against the common enemy of Israel
in other words,
and America.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right.
Okay. That's
but
growing.
That's a start. That's a start.
Right.
But my critique is that Hamas and Hezbollah, I grew up in an intellectually tough neighborhood, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
You know, every little boy.
Did you ever have to get in a fight?
Did I ever get into a fight? You got to be
Apparently
kidding.
you did, right? Yeah.
You got to be kidding. In my
I never
neighborhood,
was in a fight in my life.
well,
I never was.
Harold, you grew up
not
in
a single
you were
fight.
not in an intellectually challenging neighborhood.
All intellectually.
Intellectually.
Fits,
yeah. I mean,
anyway,
every kid in my neighborhood.
So where'd you grow up?
In the East Bronx.
Oh, in the East Bronx.
All right, but what I'm trying to say, I'm trying to say, is that I learned a long time ago, in this world, you either have a winning strategy or you have a losing strategy. There's no middle ground. You either know how to win or you know how to lose. Okay?
Okay.
All right?
Okay.
Now, Israel has 200 atom bombs and a super army. I mean, you know, it's militarily... It's,
fourth most powerful in the world.
I'm saying, you know, in other words, its strong point is its military, all right? And so it's made it into like a perfect fighting machine, all right?
Yeah.
Now, the Palestinians can't beat them militarily, and it doesn't matter whether they use suicide bombs or rockets, they can't beat them militarily. But,
Okay.
but they can beat them politically.
Yeah,
Right?
okay.
All right.
Well, all
Now,
right. Yeah.
You see, part of the problem, all right, I once met a guy named Sabri Gias.
Yeah.
I don't know if you know who.
I don't know. No,
All right,
no.
Sabri was one of the architects of the two-state theory, of the idea that,
Yeah.
that, you know, all right, the Palestinians, we lost most of Palestine, but, you know, we'll settle for, you know, a West Bank Gaza state, okay? All right. But he explained to me, I met him in Beirut, okay, and he explained to me, he had grown up as an Arab under Israel, in Israel, and he went to Hebrew University and then broke it, then went up to Beirut, et cetera, okay? And he explained, look, he said, when the refugees were driven out of Palestine into the rest of the Arab world, the rest of the Arab world said, you lost to the Jews? I mean, Jesus, I mean, you know, we have trouble with the Christians because they're tied in with the imperials. You lost to the Jews? Well, go get your country back. Here's a gun, go get your country back. They never made the slightest effort to study Zionism, to understand what its strong points, its weaknesses were, et cetera, et cetera. Just, here's the gun, go. This is him telling me, one of the architects of the Arafat line of, you know, two states, okay? I mean, he's, you know, he's explaining that they didn't really have a Hebrew language office in the PLO until he came up there.
Okay.
He put it together for them, you know? That, I mean, you know, something that studied the Hebrew newspapers every day and figured out what was going on.
Yeah, intelligence.
I mean, just, I mean, you know, in other words, what I'm saying
It'd be
is...
nice to know what we're doing.
What I'm saying is, you had these corrupt regimes, okay, and you had street nationalism. You know, in other words, the Zionists are trying to take over Palestine, so you beat up the Jews in Libya. See what I'm saying? Okay, that's primitive. Okay?
Yeah.
But today, at this particular point, I don't know how many Palestinian college professors there are in this world, but there are a lot of them.
Got to be a bunch.
There's a bunch. I mean, to say the very least. Okay? They know, and even Hamas says, we can't beat Israel militarily. Okay?
Even as we say Israel has no right to exist.
At the end, in other words, they're connected enough to the real world. I mean, that, you know, there are winners and there are losers, you know. I mean, they
And
live
they
in, like me, they grew up in an intellectually tough neighborhood, you know what I mean,
They
guy?
think that the Zionists should be, in the fullness of time, the losers.
All right, but what I'm saying is that if you can't beat them militarily, you have to beat them politically, okay? Now, you and I know how many, I challenge you, if you had a penny for every time some Palestinian got up and talked about Israeli apartheid,
Yeah,
you
you'd be a rich man.
You would be the richest man on earth,
Yeah, it's
right?
an apartheid
Okay,
system.
okay.
It's openly
but
so.
my answer to that is, if you keep talking, Mr. Palestinian, about Israeli apartheid, you go and set up your African National Congress and beat them, because that's what beat the real apartheid. And if you keep talking about Israeli apartheid is like that, that's like South Africa, Israel is like South Africa,
What you're saying is,
then study
Make
the
your point. Make your point, right?
the
and set it
victory-
up in a context,
Yeah, exactly.
To
And-
educate the world to that fact.
in other words, well,
Or
now
what?
what I'm saying,
Yeah.
what I mean, let me say what I'm saying,
Okay.
Harold,
I'm
if you
trying to
will.
understand,
Look, at this
It's
particular
important.
point,
Yeah.
if I'm going to put it to a bunch of Palestinian professors that I know here in this country,
right.
you know, you get, you over there,
Yeah.
you know, over there, you get together with some guys over in Palestine, there's a bunch of you, you set up a committee like the Americans did, and you come up with a draft constitution for a democratic, secular, binational Palestine / Israel. You know, in other words, one country with two names, one in Arabic, one in Hebrew. Okay, what are the rights of an Arab in a binational state? What are the rights of a Hebrew speaker in a binational state?
For a
what happens?
binational state. Yeah.
A binational state. In
Yeah.
other words, there are, let me put it this way, the Israelis say there are 5.3 million Israelis. Okay. In the real world, I just read in the paper, in the Times the other day, they think maybe 500,000 Israelis are in the United States. Okay? So what we're really talking about is 4 million Israelis plus 200 atom bombs. Okay? Okay?
Yeah.
Now,
And a whole bunch of tanks.
I understand that, but I'm just
Yeah.
making the point
Yeah.
that, number one, they're there and they're heavily armed. Okay? So how do you go, how do you get 200 atom bombs out of their hands? The way to do it, the only way you're going to do it, is you have to win over enough of the Israeli military and enough world public opinion, including public opinion in the United States and public opinion elsewhere, that you make them an offer they cannot refuse.
Like what?
A democratic secular state. The South African apartheid regime had 6 atom bombs. Okay? It was militarily superior to the blacks. Okay? That regime is gone. It's gone. It's history. Leaders of the apartheid regime are in the present white leaders are in the present black-dominated government.
Okay, yeah,
okay?
right. Okay,
I mean,
yeah.
so...
Well, yeah, it was inevitable there.
but it wasn't inevitable.
I don't understand this thing that you're going to be offering
I'm telling the Palestinians... I'm telling the
Palestinian position. What?
I'm telling the Palestinians if they want their rights, go and do what the African National Congress did. The African National Congress changed from an African, you had to be black to be in the African National Congress. One day they opened up their doors and said, you can be white, you can be a Boer, you can be an Englishman, you can be a Hindu, you can be, from India.
Well, that would be the obliteration of the Jewish state.
That's exactly it. But
so why would the Jews accept that? They're fighting for an Israeli
because
state.
Number one,
because
when you're talking about
they're colonizing people.
Harold, when you're talking about the Israelis, you're talking about 5.3 million people.
Right.
Like I say, 500,000, let's say 1 million of them are living outside of Israel because they don't want to be in the army all the time fighting the Palestinians. And in Israel, the ones that are there, the Israelis in Israel, I know Israelis that have a purple hatred of Judaism because they had to live in a Jewish state, okay? Where all of a sudden you're riding your bicycle in Jerusalem and all of a sudden you can't go down the road because some Orthodox screwballs have put up a roadblock.
Can't get married or something.
All right, okay.
Reform,
I mean, in other words...
women can't get a divorce?
Listen, no woman can get no Jewish woman can get a divorce in Israel. No Jewish woman. Full stop, period. The husband gets the divorce, okay? If he doesn't want to give the divorce, that's it, okay? But not only that, you have a few Reform Jews and conservative Jews. They're big in the United States. They're much bigger than the Orthodox in the United States. They're small in Israel. But one of the reasons why they're small is their rabbis are not recognized by the state of Israel.
That's right, I understand.
All right, well, what I am trying to say is that there are a lot of Israelis, okay, whose attitude is, listen, this place, I'm here, it's my country, but there's terrible things wrong, etc. Now, if the Palestinians, I had a friend who was a Zionist from the United States. He went to Israel, became a Zionist, went over there as an immigrant, and then left and came back to the United States, broke with Zionism, and then went back to Israel just as a visitor. Okay, I mean, a few years, 10 years later. And he came back and he said, look, a lot of Israelis are ready to talk to the Palestinians, but the one thing they don't want to talk about is their funeral.
Most people don't.
All right. Well, what I'm trying to say is that basically a lot of Israelis have an attitude that Hamas has nothing to offer us. All they're talking about is an Islamic state, etc., and they're talking about bombs. Okay? But if you talk to them about a democratic secular state, then a lot of Israelis say, that's what I want. I was just over in the United States where they got a democratic secular state. It's a lot better than here. I can get married to who I want. I can get divorced. All right? What I'm saying is that, basically speaking, the Palestinians have to get their act together. But since their act is to get their equivalent of the ANC together. You will forgive me if I say the Palestinians have to get their ANC together, if you follow what I mean. In other words, they got to come up with a strategy that wins over the most, they're never going to win over all the Israelis, but they can win over 30, 40%, okay? 30, 40% of the Israelis plus a majority of the Palestinians plus world a big sea change in world public opinion,
to do away with the
then
idea
what
of
I'm
a
saying
Zionist
is,
state.
what I'm saying is that, look, you have a situation in the United States today, I'm using an analogy, okay? You have a situation in the United States today where the United States never stops ranting and raving against Fidel Castro. But whenever Fidel Castro comes to the United States, Wall Street says, Fidel, we haven't seen you in years, come on and party. They are furious. How come,
Well,
hey,
you got
George,
those people down in Miami.
yeah, how come we got, how come we're not building hotels in Cuba and getting at some of that Cuban oil, all right? In other words, the government of the United States tries to represent the ruling class, but sometimes it doesn't make it, if you know what I mean, all right? It doesn't really represent them. If the Palestinians and progressive Israelis were able to come before the world public and say, here's a draft constitution of a binational state guaranteeing rights, etc. It's an imitation of the American Constitution. We picked up a little from the Cubans, you know, it's a, you know. I mean,
just give up on this idea of a Jewish state.
Yeah.
That's what you want them to give up on. Yeah.
What would happen, it would force all kinds of elements in the capitalist system, in the United States and elsewhere, to say, look, this is getting out of hand. I mean, you know, in other words, the price of oil is $75, whatever, you know, it's because you've got wars going, you know, George, you've got wars going, and you're back in Israeli wars, you got your own wars going, and you're back in Israeli wars. Why don't you do that? Okay? So what I'm saying...
It's an interesting idea.
Well, I mean, look...
So that would be the end of Zionism.
Harold, let me put it...
That's what you would
Harold,
say,
let
the
me
end
put
of
it
Zionism.
this way.
Yeah.
You and I were both friendly with Stokely Carmichael.
Love the man.
All right? Okay? Now, I mean, some of your listeners don't know that Stokely was like, what, the #2 figure in the black civil rights movement.
Yeah.
It was Martin Luther King.
Kwame Ture,
Yeah.
Pan-African.
All right, but what I'm saying
revolutionary.
is that...
He was a socialist.
Let me put it to this way. Let me put it to
That's
this
something
way.
we could bring up.
What I'm trying to say is, anybody who lived through the 60s, Stokely's name was in the newspaper every day. Yeah. Every day.
He was really funny.
Oh, no, I mean, it wasn't just funny, but what I'm trying to...
He was funny,
he was
but
funny.
He was really committed,
But what I'm saying is that he was the guy that went out there and organized the blacks in the South every day in the newspapers.
Yeah,
okay?
I loved him, yeah.
All right? I mean, when he died, it made the front page. It died years later. It made the front page of the New York Times. It made, you know, every paper in the United States.
Yeah, and it might be worth mentioning, I used to have long talks with him because I'm a Kelsonian. He was a scientific socialist.
Right.
And it might be worth talking about whether all of this is ever going to lead to a challenge of the legitimacy, supposedly, of the United States for running this planet Earth.
What I'm trying to
a larger picture.
What I'm trying to say is we knew a guy, okay, and we were part of, I mean, I was part of the movement. I was arrested 3 times, all that kind of stuff in the civil rights movement. We won.
Well, we won. You got 3 million, you got 2 million people in jail now of color.
Harold, let me put it this way. If the
We've not arrived at the promised land yet.
Harold, if the Palestinians got the rights of a black in the United States today, they would have thought they died and went to heaven.
Well, okay,
you understand what I'm saying?
Well, yeah, they're really badly treated, and a lot of that stuff...
Harold, the plain fact of the matter is South Africa is run by a black president.
Well, they had an overwhelming population advantage.
Harold, I'm trying to tell you, you cannot... It isn't fair to this world. You know, it's only a planet, Harold.
Yeah.
It's only a planet. I mean, you know, okay?
That's right.
It
in the universe, multi-universe.
No, Harold, what I'm trying to tell you, is it isn't fair to the African National Congress or the black civil rights movement in the United States to say, yeah, but there's still problems in the United States, or there's still problems in South Africa. The fact of the matter is, Abraham Lincoln
Well, they used to have
really
slavery.
did free
Yeah.
the slaves,
Yeah.
okay, and Stokely and Martin Luther King and Malcolm and all of us,
Got
et
some
cetera,
voting rights,
really
right?
got the voting rights.
And so that we can have the system
Yeah,
now.
no,
and, yeah.
I'm
understand.
ready to agree with you.
So
I mean,
you're
the
August Comte.
Look,
I mean, progress.
Harold,
Yeah.
you realize when you're talking about 2 million people in the prisons, the biggest thing they're in prison for is narcotics,
Yeah.
okay? And I am a passionate believer in legalization of marijuana,
Yeah, I know.
LSD,
Yeah.
etc. So,
Yeah.
in other words, what I'm saying is that we got a long way to go, but we have come a long way.
Mhm.
And you know, if you say we haven't reached the end of the road, all I can tell you again is if the Palestinians had the rights of a black in New York City, all right, that we would not be talking
Well,
about rockets.
that's just a
there would be no suicide bombings.
That's just a measure of the persecution of the Palestinians
Yes,
by the Jews.
Yes, but what I'm saying
And
is...
what would make them have a change of mind? They don't. That would be the end of Zionism and the
yes,
idea
of
of the
course,
Jews.
but
So
what
you're
I-
asking them to give
Well,
up
look,
their raison d'etre.
Harold, look.
It's a bit much to expect.
Harold, let me explain something.
Yeah.
Okay.
And what do you do if they
Harold,
don't even cotton to the
Harold,
idea at all?
Harold, let me explain something. There are about 13 million Jews in the world.
Okay.
5.3 million in Israel, about 5.3 million in the United States.
A lot of that in New York.
Yeah, but what I'm
Listening to
trying
this
to say,
programming,
Harold,
yeah.
what I'm trying to say,
Yeah.
in the United States of America today,
Mhm.
a majority of people who are born into Jewish families no longer believe in the Jewish religion in any way, shape, or form.
So let's give up on the Jewish religion.
So
let's
wait a
give
minute.
up on the Jewish everything. Let's just
That's-
assimilate, and that's
you
what you're
got it.
saying, right?
That
you would like to see
literally-
happen.
No,
but
Harold, it isn't.
Yeah.
I want to see it happen,
Yeah,
but Harold,
yeah.
the key thing is,
Yeah.
never mind whether I want to see it happen.
It's
The
happening.
Zionists don't want to see it happen, but everybody
Exactly.
knows it's happening.
Exactly.
Okay,
So
that's because the Jews in the United States have equal rights with everybody else, and, you know, look, when my parents came to the United States, you know,
yeah,
they lived in a Jewish neighborhood,
yeah.
okay?
The Irish lived in an Irish neighborhood. They
right,
blah-
okay.
Yeah, right.
Okay?
Yeah. New
When I
York's
was-
all mixed up now.
What I'm saying now is the average American now lives in a suburb, and they live in a white suburb, okay? And the young kid who grew up in a, let's say, a Reformed Jewish, a conservative Jewish family, or et cetera, is now marrying, the ex-Jew is marrying the ex-Catholic. Okay? In other words, everybody's talking about a religious revival in the United States. That's a fairy tale. That's a fairy tale. The reality is that all the major religions, okay, the Catholic Church is losing, I mean, the number, I mean, you go into a Hispanic neighborhood in New York, all right? Okay? When I was a kid, all of Latin America was Catholic, and the Hispanic neighborhoods were Catholic.
Yeah.
You go into a Hispanic neighborhood in New York City, and most places in the United States, but you go into a Hispanic neighborhood in New York, what do you see? Iglesia de Dios, little Protestant storefront churches. Catholic Church, where was that? I mean, they don't even know where it is
It's still a
anymore.
major force in
No,
the world.
not, in other words, it is a dying force.
Well, perhaps so. And that would, in your view,
All right.
that would be good for religion to
All right,
die
but
out.
now
and
wait
let
a
it
minute. I
become
mean, whether
secular,
I happen to think
No.
it would be a wonderful
Yeah, I
thing.
know you do,
But
yeah.
that's not the point.
No,
the
you
point
think it is dying.
that
The world is becoming secular in your
Harold,
view.
I had the good fortune to meet Egan Mayer.
I don't know.
All
Yeah.
right, I got to tell this story. This is a wonderful story, okay?
Uh-huh.
In my book, Zionism in the Age of the Dictators,
Yeah.
and in 51 documents, Zionist collaboration with the Nazis,
Uh-huh.
one of the villains of the piece is a guy named Rishu Kasna, a Hungarian Zionist who collaborated with the Nazis, okay? He did a deal in return for keeping quiet about the extermination of Jews in Hungary. Eichmann let him send 2,000 people to Switzerland, 2,000 Jews to Switzerland. One day I see that there is a website in favor of Rishu Kasna, my villain, my bad guy, and it's run by a guy named Egan Mayer, okay? So he has some documents. He's in favor of Rishu Kasna because he's the child of one of the 2,000 Jews that got out through Switzerland, okay? So he has some documents that he lists on the thing. So I figured, well, let me go to him and ask him for the documents. I'll explain I'm an anti-Zionist, et cetera, et cetera. He'll say no, but then I can say, I at least asked for the documents, right? Okay, you know, as a writer, that's what you're supposed to do. You're supposed to try to get the documents. I go to the guy and I explain what I'm doing. He says, you want the documents? Here they are. In fact, here's some more documents. I mean, this is a serious scholar at CUNY, okay? It turns out he worked on the world's largest poll ever taken. An ordinary Gallup poll is like 1,500, okay? He worked on a poll of 100,000 Americans, the biggest poll ever done.
On what issue?
He was doing it for the Jewish establishment because they wanted to find 3,000 Jews, okay, but, you know, not look them up in the phone book, if you know what I mean. In other words, do a real random, you know, a serious survey, because they wanted to find out about mixed marriage, etc., and, you know, and what the Jews were thinking, okay? So, and he did it for them.
When was this done?
Oh, about 7 years ago. Don't hold me the exact date.
Yeah, yeah, and what were the findings?
That's the problem. They found that this, everybody is racing for the door, that all the young Jews are marrying Gentiles. So what they did, listen to this, they cooked the facts, they cooked the statistics. So Egan got furious at them. I mean, you're distorting my poll, you know, okay? So he went and did another poll for CUNY, not for the Jewish establishment, of 50,000, okay? And, of course, he applied the lessons that he learned from the previous poll, etc. In other words,
and what did you find there then? Same?
The same thing.
But
this time he was able to present
it out into the public.
Yeah, you know, I mean...
so the point being is that the Jews are assimilating.
The Jews
and
are
they're
assimilating.
losing their Jewishness.
All right, all right. Now, what's happened, here, let me give you an example. Like, for example, the Jews were run out of Libya by riots, okay, in 48, okay? Now, the ones that knew some Italian, because the Italians had been in Libya for 50 years, they didn't go to Israel, they went to Italy.
The Italians, yeah.
Yeah, no, I mean the Jews in Libya who had learned Italian under the Italians, they didn't go to Israel when they were run out.
They decimated something over half of the population of Libya by the Italian fascists.
No, I understand, but I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about the Jews now.
Okay.
The same thing happened in Morocco.
What's the lesson? I mean,
the lesson is that what happened is that the most fanatically religious and least assimilated of the Jews went to Israel, okay? The rest of the Jews have been moving in the other direction. Today, right now, this minute, a majority of young Jews marry Gentiles in every country in the world except Israel and Australia.
That can't go on for very long and still keep a Jewish identity. There must be a lot of people who are of a Jewish persuasion that find that very threatening.
Well, the Jewish establishment is, let me put it this way, if you pick up Forward, which is the leading...
I know it, it's on the corner.
or Jewish Week. I'm using the two leading Jewish community papers in New York, okay? Every other article, one article is what's going on in the poor Israelis, the other article is, hey, we're losing our kids, okay? That's an irreversible trend, and the reason for, and it's the same irreversible trend that's happening with the Catholics and with the Episcopalians, etc. I mentioned this.
So it's a race towards secularism?
It's a race towards assimilation and secularism.
In secularism,
what is happening? What is happening is, in the United States, I'm using the United States as an example, but this is going on in one form or another all over the world. I was born in 1937. The first census after me was after my birth was the 1940 census. Okay. At that time, only 4% of Americans had a bachelor's degree. That's 1 out of 25. Today, 26% of Americans have a bachelor's degree. 17% of blacks have a bachelor's degree. In other words, I mean, understand, in other words, when you had, remember, 4% of Americans, that means 4% basically of white America only had a bachelor's degree. Today, 17% of blacks, who are the poorest element in America, have bachelor's degree. I mean, obviously the blacks with bachelor's degrees aren't the poorest, but you get my point.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, what I'm saying is...
Yeah, what are you saying?
What I'm saying is that the rise of education has meant a challenge to religion, and it's because the kids study science. Now, look, this is as true in the Arab world as it is among the Jews, okay? And in Iran, et cetera, et cetera. I lived in Berkeley, California for 20 years.
Yeah, I remember you did. Yeah, right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Berkeley is a major engineering school. I mean, you know, take my word for it. It's a major scientific school, all right? The place was full of Arabs and Iranians, okay? They were, I knew dozens and dozens and dozens and dozens and dozens of Marxists, man, whose attitude was, get away from me with that Islam, or in some cases with that Christianity, et cetera. I'm a Marxist now, et cetera, et cetera. All based on science. In the Arab world, you've been to Lebanon, I've been to Lebanon. When I was there in 1981, okay, Lebanon, you know, is about 35% Christian, okay? Lebanon is also the only country in the world that I have ever been to where people sell whiskey bottles on the street. Never mind going into a bar.
I don't remember the whiskey. I remember falafel. A lot of falafel.
All right, a lot of falafel. But no, I'm talking about guys there like peddlers in New York, only they're selling whiskey.
I'm trying to get at, what are you getting at with it all? You're saying the world's going secular, hallelujah, Judaism will go, Israel will go if they go, you know, I don't quite know what you're getting
at this particular point.
You're optimistic?
In this particular point, if the Palestinians and progressive Israelis turn to the Israeli population, turn to the Palestinian population, turn to the world population, they got to say the same thing to everybody, okay?
Forget about a Jewish state.
Forget about a Jewish state.
That's a big step.
What we want is a democratic, secular state. No, you know, in other words, the state is the post office, man. It runs chug-a-chug, it don't care what day of the week it is.
Well, that's the end of Zionism. Then.
That's the end of Zionism.
So
but I'm saying
end of Zionism.
the only way to get to the end of Zionism is to win over people from Zionism. Because unless you have X number of Israelis in the Israeli military who are prepared to unplug the bombs, if you follow me, then the Zionists have the bombs and they're in power. I mean, you know, like, I mean, listen, I grew up in a tough neighborhood, but any neighborhood, that's reality.
Yeah, you made the point in a certain sense. So that means that, and they don't seem to be following that tack now. They're just absolutely leveling Lebanon. I mean, they're not following that tack now.
No, because what
95% of the people in Israel are charging, yay, go and bomb the bejesus out of Lebanon, and let's exert our control. Let's, you know, they're not taking that course that you can be seen.
Look, it's really very simple.
And I wanted to ask you a couple of things. You give me a lot of information. It's very interesting. I would hope it could work. That might work, and you'd be able to have peace by having that kind of a thing you're saying, ANC and that kind of thing. But it doesn't seem to be what's happening on the ground in the real world.
I'm trying to tell you, instead of organizing an ANC, okay, what we're having is suicide bombings.
Okay, you say suicide. You had suicide bombing on the part of Palestinians that were doing that, against that, and then they would roll into Ramallah when Mr. Arafat was that. And yet they have that, and they would beat them down, and they've got overwhelming power, the Israelis do, and they exercise it. And they exercise that very clearly. Jews exercising that over the people, colonial power and that kind of thing. They have that, and the people can cower, and they got complete control over it, and they can do that. And then you've got an election of a Hamas group that doesn't recognize the right of Israel to exist because they've been so persecuted, that built up and so forth. Now you've got a thing going in Hezbollah up in Lebanon where there's some resistance to the Israeli...
Yeah.
There are people... What about... Have they given up? Mr. Sharon doesn't seem to be the person who wants to give up on the idea
Sharon is brain dead.
I know that, but the Likudnik, the thing that exerted... There are people who have the idea of having complete Israeli control over the whole Middle East with their expansion of their power.
Harold,
so why are they going to give up and go fold their tents and go quietly into the night when they're exerting control with all that military power, and it's unlimited power that they've got to exert that colonial control over the WOGs?
Harold, I'm trying to tell you something,
okay,
which is very simple. The Palestinians cannot beat the Israelis.
All right, that's
Harold, let me finish.
Well, all right, you spoke
Harold,
for 35
let
minutes.
me finish.
Okay, but let me get a point or two
You
in.
just went on for 5 minutes.
You went on for 45.
Harold.
And you laid it out, and it was very good.
All right, Harold,
no, really.
I'm trying to tell you.
Tell me. You say they cannot win.
They cannot
win question it militarily. You think not. It seems to be that they're coming up in a situation, if I may, you cannot fight the colonial overlords. You must give in to their... That's what they used to say in all of the colonial powers.
I'm trying to tell you, in South Africa, they got rid of the colonial overlord, but they didn't do it with suicide bombing.
Well, you keep saying suicide bombing as though any kind of a dance, you know, there was always that thing they would say, you can't stand up to the colonial power.
Harold,
the reason they did that...
Blacks in the United States, you say, are oppressed, right?
Of course.
Do you think that they should commit suicide bombings?
Well, why do you equate...
Harold, I asked you a question.
Well, of course not.
Well, then why are you saying...
Well, why do you equate all opposition? I know any opposition to those who have the power...
Harold, I'm not equating all opposition. I'm simply saying everybody knows...
What I'm trying to say...
Harold, does Hamas commit suicide bombings?
I suppose
or no?
They have, I think, yeah.
Well, then what are we arguing about?
What we're arguing about is that in Hamas now...
Do you want them to commit suicide bombings?
What do they do when
they... Do you want Hamas...
Well, there were people...
Harold, answer my question, yes or no. Do you want Hamas to commit suicide bombings?
Of course not.
Then why are you trying to...
Of course not. Of course not. What a stupid question. What a stupid question.
Well, then a stupid question.
What do people do...
in our language...
What do people do when they are forced to absolutely they have no other option to do something? They lash out in some kind of a way.
Harold, what they usually do, as the saying goes, when in trouble or in doubt, run in circles, scream and shout. Okay? In other words, what I'm saying to the Palestinians is, instead of running in circles and screaming and shouting, come up with a program, a real constitution for a democratic secular state, take it out there to the world public opinion, organize your ANC, pick a target for a march, a Selma Bridge march.
So you're going to follow the example of the American
In other words, literally take like a template, you know, I mean, just copy, imitate success, okay? In other words, look, Stokely Carmichael was a passionate pro-Palestinian.
Yeah,
right?
Of course.
What I'm telling the Palestinians is imitate Stokely Carmichael. All right? He won.
What did he win? What did he win? For the Palestinians?
Harold, he
or you're
won
talking
for
about
the blacks in the United States.
The right to vote down in Alabama and that. And,
yeah.
And you think the American example, we gave the slaves the vote.
Harold,
or, you know, that kind of thing.
Harold. Look, I was jailed.
What are you saying, America?
Harold, I was jailed 3 times during the Civil Rights movement.
I was jailed a few times.
All right, what I'm trying to say is, no, look, Harold.
We shouldn't have protested?
Harold, please, I don't understand what you, I mean, everything is rear backwards with you. Harold, I'm saying we fought the system in the United States. The system not only was persecuting the blacks. Harold, I have my FBI file, man. They were following me in the streets from civil rights movement demos, etc.
I know.
What I'm trying to get at, Harold, is that if Harold, I can only say the same thing 20 times. If you don't get it, it's a waste of time to say it the 21st time.
Go ahead.
If the Palestinians keep talking about Israeli apartheid, then it's up to them to build their own African National Congress. That's it. Okay? I mean, you know, let me put it this way. I believe in revolution. I don't believe in charity. Okay? In other words, I believe in telling people, you got a problem, here's the answer. I don't, oh, you poor fellow. here's a Band-Aid.
Yeah.
All right? There
I
are
don't
winners
understand
and
that
losers,
enough.
Harold.
What do you think
Harold,
about
Harold.
what do you think about Hezbollah in Lebanon now?
What do I think about it?
Yeah, I mean, there's 87% of the people in Lebanon approve the idea of Hezbollah attacking Israel with that kind of thing. You think that's a losing strategy because Israel is so powerful that they should follow and try? I mean, what do you think about that? Or the Arab world, or the world in general confronting the superpower?
Harold, I just got done telling you. All right? In other words...
So they should do that in Lebanon?
Look, I was in Lebanon in 1981, all right? And at that, at what Lebanon has, so I know a little something about it on the ground, okay? What Lebanon has is not a secular state. What Lebanon has is a system where the president has to be a Christian, the prime minister is a Sunni, the speaker of the House has to be a Shia, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, all right? And that Lebanese regime denies Palestinians equality in Lebanon.
Well,
all right? Now, Harold,
okay.
What I'm saying is that the entire Arab world needs a democratic, secular revolution.
We're trying to do that in Iraq, aren't we? George Bush is trying to give them democracy.
Harold, how dare you equate me and George Bush?
No, I'm just, I don't
Bush
understand.
is not creating a democratic secular state.
Of course
He has never even mentioned it.
Of course
he doesn't
not.
even claim to do it, Harold.
Okay, yeah. Well, no, we
Harold, come on. I mean, you sucked that out of your thumb. He's not claiming it. He's working with a bunch of Shia fanatics.
But he's got, George Bush has 5,000 atomic bombs.
Harold, I'm trying to tell you right now, one of the things that's happening in Iraq as a result of the war that's going on in Lebanon is all of a sudden people are saying, why, yo, Al-Qaeda, why are you killing Sunni, why are you killing Shia when the Israelis are attacking in Lebanon?
Do you think the Islamic world will find...
Harold, you have me on your show, you ask me a question, I'm telling you. Look, at the same time people are turning to the Shia, like what's his name, the prime minister, the puppet prime minister, he had to get up in Bush's face and say that he's in favor of
against Israel.
Against Israel. So it's occurring. I mean, I'm reading, the British newspapers, etc., and they're saying the Arab in the street.
Right.
The Arab in the street right now.
Yeah.
Harold, don't put words in my mouth, please. Harold, they're saying, the Arab in the street is saying, hey, why are we fighting each other? Okay? That's a big step forward.
That's what I was trying to say.
But Harold, Bush is not in favor of a democratic secular state anywhere. He doesn't even claim to be.
But Bush and the United States of America is that made Israel possible. They're our ally in the world.
Harold,
and
that's
if the Arab world, or if the world in
Harold,
general...
what are you arguing
Well,
with
I'm
me
trying to
over?
make a point that you won't let me make. And I'm trying to get a historical context. We have a planet that's operating under a system with an order that assumes itself to be legitimate, led by the United States of America, and everybody, in a certain sense, assumes that's the legitimate order. Is there ever going to be, and if there is, a challenging to that? Israel is in league with the United States of America. They've got superpower.
Well, we're seeing, look,
is there going to be a rising of the Arab countries against perhaps Israel, and that they're going to focus on that in the face of the fact that there is such an objection to them asserting their power so deliberately?
Look, Harold,
and if there is, could that be a method by which... Is the United States leadership of the world ever going to be challenged by the people of the world that are being ill-served with a system that's not adequate to what the future requires?
The 21st time, Harold, is if the Palestinians get their act together, okay, with a winning strategy, that will have enormous repercussions in the United States. Right now, in the United States, when I got involved in the Palestinian issue 20 years ago, we could meet, all the anti-Zionists in America meet in a broom closet.
Yeah,
okay?
a broom closet.
All right?
Yeah.
Today, The Zionists are saying, we're surrounded on all four sides. Every college campus, there are people marching around demonstrating.
That's good.
This. I'm saying.
That's good.
I'm saying.
So
okay?
can they take that and direct
Harold,
it not just...
if you will listen to me.
Well, I will,
You
but...
ask the question, you get my answer. Don't give me your answer to your question.
Okay.
All right?
Is there...
Harold.
Go ahead, answer.
Okay.
We only got a couple minutes
I'm
left.
saying that as America runs into these enormous contradictions...
Of capitalism, for one thing.
Harold, you ask the questions.
Yeah.
I mean, either you're going to answer your question,
Hurry
or
up,
I'm
Lenny,
going to
answer. We only got a minute left.
Then shut up and
Okay.
I'll answer.
Okay.
Shut up.
Okay. Go ahead.
Okay?
Mm-hmm.
All right? I'm saying what's beginning to happen in the United States is that people are challenging both the Republicans and the Democrats on the question of the Middle East.
Good.
All right? Now, where it will end, I don't know, but one of the things that would help bring down the system in the United States is if the Palestinians got their political act together, okay? Because you can't really succeed in the United States acting as a defense attorney for a crazy client. You can't get up and say, ladies and gentlemen, my client here, the Palestinians, they're terribly persecuted. It's driven them crazy, so please forgive them. That isn't going to work. In other words, what you have to be able to say is, ladies and gentlemen,
provide an alternative.
Ladies and gentlemen of the jury,
provide an alternative.
My Palestinians here are persecuted, and they got a terrific idea called the democratic secular state.
Great, and we should provide an alternative to the system that's running the world. Now, I'm in agreement with that. I don't see it coming from what you were talking, but that's okay. I'm hoping we're in complete agreement that there has to be a qualitative change in the principle.
What do you mean, we, white man?
I would mean primarily the person who are thinking...
Do you know the old Tonto joke?
Yes, I know.
Okay.
What do you mean, we?
Yeah, in other words, Harold, what I'm saying is we, who are pro-Palestinian, pro-democratic...
Pro-people of the world.
Harold, shut up.
Okay.
Harold, we have to convince the American people of two things. Number one, the Palestinians are persecuted. Number two, that the Palestinians and progressive Israelis have a solution, an answer to the question.
I don't think they do.
Well,
so that's good. So that's a thing we could have a discussion about.
Harold,
we never got a chance to have a discussion.
The minute you shut up, we have a discussion.
Well, we didn't get a chance to have a discussion.
No, Harold,
that's all right.
Harold, you know, look.
But we like the trending. We both like the trending. What the answer is something that really takes an understanding. We need a new economic philosophy. We need a new operating manual for Spaceship Earth, and I agree with that.
Harold, look,
we agree with that.
The average American doesn't know that the Bill of Rights and the First 10 Amendments are the same thing.
I think the sun goes around.
Yeah, okay.
We got to say goodbye because it's closing credits.
All
yeah,
right.
I know.
What basically we have to do is educate them about every player in the Middle East.
Not only the Middle East, we have
and every player in America.
We have to come up with a new operating manual for Spaceship Earth to change the whole system.
Harold,
that's my contention.
No,
Systems
what we got to do, first thing
because
we
what's
do
in place
is tell
not
them
order group.
What's going on now, who the forces are, et cetera, et cetera.
Right.
Then they'll be able to
be nice if there was some place where you could go and talk about it.
After they know what they're talking about, then they can
We agree. We agree.
Right.
It's just a question of getting the niceties down of what the system is that's going to be relative to where the operating of the system of the world beyond that which is assumed to be legitimate. Now, the legitimacy of the system now has to be questioned, whether it's going to be socialism or it's going to be some sort of economic system. Something has to change to serve the people of the world, and we agree on that. And the thing in the Middle East might be setting a context where that can finally come up, and we agree on that.
All I can tell you is we will know in our time, or, you know, shortly after, since we're a bunch of oldies here.
Yeah, okay. It's rather.
We will know whether democracy is possible.
Real democracy.
Yeah, I'm saying.
Real democracy. Yeah, we want the same thing.
But I'm saying that the biggest